Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Ask an Expert Parent Education series, sponsored by Konick and Associates. I'm Dr. Lisa Konick. I'm a psychologist and founder of Konick and Associates. We are a group practice specializing in child and family behavioral health and psychological assessment services. And this is the third segment of our Navigating the Ever-Changing Educational Climate During the COVID Pandemic series. And today I have with us Angela Molloy. She is an executive functioning coach and executive functioning expert from Beyond BookSmart. And she's going to be talking to us today about executive functioning tools for students and families. Welcome to our webinar today, Angela. I appreciate you coming.
Thank you.
Live Q&A on Facebook Live. Thank you for bearing with us, everyone. We had a little technical difficulty getting started today, but I hope we're up and running. And I just want to remind everyone that this is a free event, so please do not respond if there are any requests for payment or credit card information. We've had some notification that scammers are kind of jumping onto these live feeds, so we do not want you to add any of that information to our posts. So please don't give any information out, personal information. Today, we're going to be looking at providing information and resources to parents in the community, particularly during this uncertain time with remote learning. And Angela's going to be speaking to us. Angela, you probably have been having a lot of parents ask questions specifically about how do I set up school? How do I set up classroom for this remote learning, which is very new and for many parents, especially, college students are pretty good with this, but younger elementary age kids particularly are really having a harder time. So I'm very excited, Angela, for you to be talking with us about some strategies that we can put in at home for parents. Before we get started, I'm going to introduce Angela. Angela Molloy is a licensed professional educator and former school counselor. Over the past 4 years, she has served as an executive functioning coach, supervisor, and outreach coordinator for Beyond BookSmart, based in Chicago. Previously, Angela worked as a special education assistant, an independent college counselor, a high school career counselor, and a remote learning coordinator. So she's got all this covered for us parents. She earned her master's degree in school counseling from Roosevelt University and her undergraduate degree in psychology and communication studies at Elmhurst College. She's currently working full-time from home while supporting e-learning from her daughter in kindergarten and her son in 5th grade. So good to know, Angela, that you have little ones. So you're with us in this dilemma of figuring out a full home environment. So
yes, very much in it.
Tell us a little bit about BookSmart and why families might be interested in an executive functioning coach, and not families, but also adults.
Yeah, sure. So Beyond BookSmart, we're an executive function coaching company, and we were established in 2006 by an author and educator, Michael Delman. We are actually the nation's largest executive function coaching company. And so our coaches will work with students and adults to just improve. And I know I keep throwing this term executive functioning around, but a lot of the skills that we work on are like organization, planning, prioritizing, managing time, starting tasks, and maintaining attention, all while being able to kind of regulate our emotions. So oftentimes, like a family or adult might want to work with us because they struggle in one of those areas. Or a lot of times we'll hear, I just feel like I can't get myself together, or I feel like I am switching back and forth between all these tasks, and at the end of the day, I've got nothing done, right? Or with students, a lot of what we see is they might not be able to capture what the assignments are. They're missing pieces of it, or they do the work and then forget to turn it in. They might struggle to study for exams. Not because they don't understand the content, but because they either don't have an effective way to approach the material, or they're cramming the day before and then having a hard time committing all of that information to memory. So there's a lot of reasons right then and there why somebody might want to work with a coach. Our overall goal is helping clients be able to self-manage, right? So that you want to be able to work through your day effectively and efficiently, so you're not feeling stressed out all the time. There is, I think, a good a correlation definitely between mental health and stress and anxiety and executive functioning skills. So oftentimes we have people who will work with a therapist who might work more on the emotional side of things, while we're here helping teach the skills and reflecting on why they're important and how to regulate better. So
And that's an interesting thing that you mentioned, because in our practice, we do a lot of work, and executive functioning is kind of a fancy phrase that we're using a lot in these last few years. And some people not really understand what that is. But if you have a child, or you yourself has ADHD, for example, you have executive functioning difficulties. And those are the things that we assess for in our practice. And we assist people in understanding where their executive functioning difficulties might be. And then we may work with somebody like Angela's company or Angela's coaching staff to help people put those resources and tools in place to account for those deficits. So we do those full assessments to look at those specific areas, like you said, organization, time management, getting started or initiating tasks, emotion regulation. These are all areas of executive functioning that people tend to have difficulty with when they're feeling disorganized, problems with time management. And it affects your educational attention, your focus, and all those areas. So I think, Angela, thank you for that, because I think people don't always know what executive functioning pertains to. So how do I know if I need it?
Exactly. Yeah. And it seems like a very like simplistic explanation of it, but it's the get it done skills, right? It's how do we get from point A to point B and not fall apart in between while we're doing all of that. And there's a lot of different strategies and tools. And I think another thing I've noticed just in years of working with students, and even just exploring and reflecting on how I get through my day, they're all interconnected in some way, shape, or form. So, being disorganized can affect your ability to start a task, right? If you can't start, or you can't find things, you don't have everything set up right away, you can't prioritize what you're going to do first. And therefore, you're going to take longer to do things. So everything kind of impacts one another. If you're feeling stressed and anxious, right? And I know, Lisa, you talk a lot about this too. You can't even access that part of your brain that deals with these skills. So yeah, there's so much interconnectedness between them.
And, and I think it's different in every, we use the term executive functioning, and as clinically, executive functioning does affect us. We can have an executive functioning deficit without having a diagnosis.
Correct.
But inherently in ADHD, and also inherently with individuals on the autistic spectrum, we see a lot of executive functioning challenges. We have an ADHD family in my family. My two children are both adolescents that have ADHD, and it presents in very different ways. One is more impulsive and blurts things out. The other one just forgets everything, and we see a trail of clothes, lingering behind, out the door and down the hall. So it does have a different. It can have a different presentation across different people.
Absolutely. Yes.
So I guess, Angela, what we would be interested in hearing, and I have some questions that have been posed that I think families can relate to. Let's go through some of those, and then maybe at the end we can talk about why would somebody want to bring on an executive functioning coach, and how would they find out more information about your company. One of the questions that we have is posed by a parent. My son struggles with focus. What can we do to help him maintain focus while doing remote learning? Which is an excellent question.
Yes. And I think that a lot of what you can do, you can kind of gear it towards any age group. So I've got this problem with my kids at home. I've got a kindergartner who has about a 45-second attention span, right? So I'm in here working, and I hear my husband in the other room with her. Stop it. Sit down. Don't touch that. Pay attention to your Zoom class. It's not time to color right now, right? Because she's 5. So it's very normal for her. But one of the things that I'm really trying to do, and I always encourage other families to do, is have a designated workspace. And it sounds like, well, duh, anybody can tell me to have a designated workspace. But sometimes parents get stuck there, and they're like, well, how do I set this up? What do I do? So one of the things that I tried to make sure that we did, or that, I would help a family or a client do, is figure out what your materials are. What do you need for remote learning? Let's figure this out ahead of time so we don't start already behind. Now I know we're already kind of like in the about a month into the school year. But I even just went through and I kind of reorganized my daughter's space last week by just getting cups for her pencils, right? So I had an idea of what the supplies were that I needed, set up the space a little bit in a way that I thought would be conducive. And then as things kind of, went on, I was like, some of these things are not working. Like, we can't find the pencils or this. So just putting them in cups, right, on the desktop is something that's helped tremendously, because now all of her markers are separated from her pencils, and it's easier for her to find them. With older kids, I would, as a parent, not do this for them, right? You want to kind of collaborate with them and help them think about what's going to be the best way to set up this space. Where should your computer go for distance learning? Where should your charger go? What do you think would be best? Do we want to have a schedule in front of us of our day? Do we want to have our materials on the desk? Do we want to have a rolling cart next to us where we, depending on whether we're in a private space or if we're in more of a public space like a dining room. So there's so many different ways to go about doing this. You just kind of have to figure out what's going to be best for your family. And so if you get stuck, right, that's where having somebody like a coach can help you set that space up. Another one I hear a lot of with attention is digital distractions, right? My son came up to me last week and said, "Oh, I watched YouTube for an hour on my break and didn't do any of my work." Great. Okay. So one thing that you can do is there's a bunch of apps, and I have an infographic that has apps to manage distractions, which I know it sounds like, I'm going to use technology to block technology, but these apps are great and they help kind of resist that temptation. It's almost like turning on do not disturb for your phone, but there's other ones that like Freedom, Cold Turkey are ones, and again, we'll link these after in the comment section. You can schedule them to go off at a certain time so that it'll block like YouTube or TikTok or whatever your kids are distracted by or you're distracted by, right? Like I've been tempted to set up one of these blockers to block Amazon during work hours, so I'm not ordering things that are showing up, in a couple of days. So because I know screen time, they're on screens all day, but we want them to be mindful of what they're looking at on the screens and not getting lost in that YouTube or TikTok rabbit hole.
That's a great idea. And I have actually had some adult clients that are struggling with executive functioning that we've kind of learned about I teach people to learn about your areas of challenge. What are your what are your obstacles? And they are very savvy at finding these apps and educating me on how they are blocking their distractions, their obstacles, like learning your obstacle and being mindful that, maybe I reward myself with a little, texting time in between classes, but not during class, because then they're losing instructional time. So I think that's a great tip, and you can share some afterwards. The other thing that I've seen some people doing, and I've seen this on my Facebook feed and also on Pinterest, is parents are getting really clever with setting up blockers between their children. So they're getting, boards that you would use for presentation boards and creating kind of a little workspace. And I think about how associative we are. When you sit at your desk, you associate that with focus and work. When you lay in your bed, you associate that with relaxing time. So really trying to set up your space to be associating with that. That is my alert. This is my education. So that's
and that is one thing I had mentioned. I gave a presentation to an elementary parent group last week, and that was one of my suggestions, was if you don't have a designated workspace, like we have an unfinished basement. You can see, right, my ceiling's not quite finished. So on the other side of the wall over here is kind of where the kid space is, and I just have a desk set up sort of like off to the side for my daughter, and then my son has a desk in his room. And so he's in 5th grade, so I don't always go up there, but the desk is there and a place for him to work. And he knows he should not be sitting on his bed trying to do work, because bed you associate with sleep. You want to have that associated place for work. And as much as you can to like try to remove distractions, like physical distractions. So I know one thing that I try to do is keep the dogs upstairs, because with my daughter in kindergarten, anytime the dog walks by, she wants to show her class, right? I know you probably see memes about the kindergarten teachers about all these kids are like, look at my dad, so-and-so, look at my dog, look at this, right? Because they're so distracted by everything around them. So as much as you can, remove the distractions. You don't have to completely like renovate your house, but maybe they go in a basket or a bin or something for the school day and you can bring them back later. But that's a really important one. And sometimes you don't know what the distractions are until you see that your kids are distracted by it. And then you have to be like, oh yeah, we need to remove that from the equation, or help them figure out whether they should remove that from the equation.
We have another question. Thank you, Angela, for those suggestions. So another one is about organization. My kid is extremely disorganized and struggles to keep track of both physical papers and digital information. How can we help him get organized and keep things that way?
Yeah. So getting organized is this is my area of expertise, right? This is my specialty. I love organizing like drawers and things, and my husband thinks I'm crazy, but it helps me feel calm. So um,
And we really
in
do
terms of
disorganization to stress. The
yeah,
more the clutter, for example, can be
yeah,
stressful.
yeah. So one thing, they're probably not getting a ton of physical papers right now, depending on their age group. The younger kids might be so much. Like we have to go every 2 weeks and pick up a packet from the school that from the kindergarten teacher because they're cutting things and like she's providing their letter worksheets and they can't do all that online. But for younger kids and older kids, a lot of them are probably using like Google Classroom, Google Drive. Almost every school district I've ever worked in has used Google. And so one thing that I've always maintained a habit of doing, and I try to help my students do when I'm working with them, is create a folder for every class or every subject. And then you can save your documents in those folders so that they're easier to find. You can color code those. You can star them, and so that you can find the things that you use more frequently. Google also kind of has that cool feature where it'll suggest things at the top for you if it knows that you use them more frequently. Or even if like I use my Google Calendar religiously, and so if there's a document associated with a calendar event, Google will know what time it is, and it'll suggest that document for me, depending on whether what's in my schedule for that day. But for physical papers, you want to have some sort of tiered system. So it's going to look different for every kid because every kid has different needs. Every kid has a different way of organizing. Every teacher's handing out different kinds of papers. So there just has to be some sort of system that works. So one thing that I kind of like is a 3-tiered file where it's sort of like you can either have it to like I need to do this, I'm in the process of doing this, or this is done and needs to be filed away. You can even use this for non-school related things. You probably have seen it before, but if I'm cleaning out a closet, for example, I might put things in a keep pile, a donate pile, and a garbage pile, and then take care of those things right away is the other thing to be able to stay organized. Because a lot of times, and I'm guilty of this too, if I know I need to file something away, I don't always do it right away. I put it in a folder to file later, and then it sits there for a month, and I don't always do it. So as much as you can kind of get done right away, I think is important. So at the end of the day, I'm trying to get my kids into the habit of put your things back in their home spots. So don't leave your markers laying all over the floor. Like Lisa, you mentioned, right, the trail of clothes.
Mm-hmm.
My son had that problem too. And so I have an open laundry. We tried everything, but I have an open laundry basket by his door. And I had to put a sign on the door once, like on the wall with an arrow, dirty clothes go here. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So it has to be very explicit if they often are missing things. So labels are great in that sense, and color coding also. And there's so many ways, right? You can see I love organizing and being organized. So and then in terms of keeping track of your day-to-day things, like here's where a schedule is key. I made a schedule for my daughter, like the time she's in her Zoom class, when she goes to her PE class. Teachers do this in the classroom, right? They'll have a schedule on the board. This time we're doing math. This time we're doing social studies. And then even when they get to middle and high school, they have a schedule that they're following. When the bell rings, it's time to switch class. So you can very much try to mimic something like that at home. It doesn't maybe have to be so specific. It could just be you have Zoom this time, you have your specials this time. This is time to work on your independent work. And then after school hours is time for things not related to school.
And I think about scheduling as also a calming strategy. If we
Mm-hmm.
know what to expect, and I can speak to the executive functioning aspects to how it increases or decreases our anxiety. Schedules for kids like to know what to expect. And if they know that this is coming next, and this is when the day is over, and this is when I have my break, and this is when I have my free time, and that consistency with the structure can help with organization too.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And I also think about the process of beginning, a middle, and end. And its end isn't when the class teacher signs off. It's when you've put all your things away.
Yes.
So
Yes.
think about structure and organization as we are not done until things go back, like you said, in their home space. And then our work area.
Yeah, I think that's a good point too, because a lot of times, like I mentioned before, kids might do their homework but forget to turn it in. So really the end of the assignment isn't when you've completed the last question or the last problem. The last step is when it gets to the teacher for
Yeah.
grading.
Yeah.
So I think it's the same concept there. Absolutely.
Yeah. Let me
And
go.
I know some, go ahead.
Angela. I was going to switch us.
Yeah, no, I was just going to mention another just quick digital option to keep track of assignments, because sometimes, kids might, they might not have a ton of homework right now, but there is an app called My Homework, which is a great option, especially for older elementary, middle school, and high school students, and even college. I have a college student who, when I introduced this to him, it just clicked with him, and he's used it ever since. So it's basically a digital planner for them, because you hear all the time, get them a planner to write down their assignments. But oftentimes, right, it's just an extra step that they don't want to do.
Yeah.
And since kids are so tech savvy anyways, My Homework is usually a great option for them. And so you can color code your classes. You can add a calendar with daily alerts, due dates. You can sort things by priority. There's a lot of different views. So it kind of, I think, works for a lot of different ways that we organize information. There's also an option, you can pay $5 a year and have the feature shared with either a parent or a coach. If they're working with somebody like, an executive function coach or a therapist who's, helping with these kinds of strategies, you can pay $5 for the year and have them be able to access it too.
I have had some clients that use that as well at college, and they've found it useful, especially for the kids that don't like to write with handwriting, or have kids that lose paper don't necessarily use planners, because then they lose their but they never lose their phone. So apps can be an alternative. So that's a good. Here's
I always recommend Google Calendar too, to kids when they're trying to use a planner or a paper calendar, because I will always ask them, what's the one thing you have with you without fail? And they're always like, well, my phone. I was like, well, you can use a calendar on your phone.
So we can use sources like because they're always handy. They always have them. Yeah, they covet the phone. They don't covet the paper planner. One that you started getting to a little bit here. My daughter often waits until the last minute to start assignments, including long-term projects. We all have had this experience. It's very stressful. What are some ways that we can help to get her started, for one thing, and then also to manage her time so that she isn't so stressed out?
Yeah. So in this one, one of the tools that there's kind of a couple different names of tools, but basically you want to break down the assignment into its parts, and I do this with the laundry too. So if you need anything about something as concrete as laundry, when I take clothes out of the dryer and I throw them on my bed, I'm like, oh my God, that's a huge pile. I don't want to deal with this. Like, that is just too much. And then what I'll do is, and I'll ration with myself and go, no, it's okay. Like, just sort it out by item. So then I'll, here are the socks, here are the pants, here are the shirts. Suddenly I have 3 small piles, and I'm like, well, these really aren't so bad. So I'll start with the socks. And then I'm like, well, that wasn't so bad. Now I only have these 2 small piles left. So breaking things down and chunking them out into similar tasks is a great way to kind of just get started on something, especially a big looming assignment like a long-term project or an essay. And for kids who struggle with writing, right, they are often really overwhelmed with writing essays. And so showing them the different parts of the essay can sometimes be a way to help alleviate some of that, because it's like, well, just do all these, smaller tasks, and then you kind of have the whole big picture there. So it just helps make everything more manageable. And if you think about, writing an essay, there's a lot that goes into that, right? So you have to research a topic, you have to develop a thesis statement, or if it's a simple 5-paragraph essay, you kind of have to outline it and figure out what goes where. So there's a lot of executive function skills that go in that, because you need to organize your information, you got to plan out your time, and then you have to get it all done, right, in that specific timeline. There's another tool that we use, which is kind of similar to chunking and breaking down information. We call it steps time mapping. And so what that does is it helps the kids break things down into kind of those mini goals by having them first write down all the steps that are required for the project, including things like turn it in, right? That's a step.
That is
Exactly, right? And then once they have those steps, they have to put them in the right order, right? So whenever I have them write down the steps, I'm not asking them to write down the steps right then and there. Just write out the steps. That's it. That's all you got to do first. Then next, what we're going to do is we're going to kind of put them in order. And you can use Post-its for this, or like just have a table on a document where you can cut and paste things, because then you can kind of manipulate it and move the steps around. once you have the steps, you need to kind of figure out how much time is each step going to take me. Because a lot of times kids will either under or overestimate
Yes.
how long all those steps will take. Right. And even sometimes if they're thinking about, well, I need to write this essay, it should just take me a couple hours. Well, actually, and then they find that it's not true when they are waiting till Thursday night to do it. And they're like, oh my God, I need more hours in the day. I'm not going to get this done by the deadline. So then once they figure out the time that it's going to take for each task, next is map it out on your calendar. Use either your paper calendar, your digital calendar, your My Homework app, your student planner, whatever method you're using to keep track of your homework. All of the steps for these particular projects should go in there. So that's one way to really kind of help make that a little bit more manageable.
It's interesting.
You're not starting at the last minute either.
When you're describing that, Angela, I have talked to a lot of, especially high school and college students that are notorious for this procrastination problem.
Yeah.
They tend to say, well, I don't really need to start on that today. I'm going to go out and hang out with my friends. And I say, well, if you've mapped this out visually on your calendar and you look at your calendar and you say, today I was going to work on this assignment, but instead I'm going to hang out with my friends. And then you look, you have to be able to move that 2-hour slot somewhere else. And if you can't find a space between now and the time that it's due, then you really can't go out with your friends. So it's in that thought process of this block needs to move to another location. And if I don't have a space to put it in for the rest of the week, then I really probably should be doing it now. And having that self-monitoring piece, which is also an executive functioning skill, be part of that process. And this is kind of that challenge, I think, for parents, because parents are just getting on their kids to do it, and the kids are saying, I don't want to do it yet. So it's interesting to teach some of these. Time management is really kind of being in charge of the schedule.
Yes. Yeah. And I love that you say that, right, that self-monitoring piece. That's an area that we weave into our coaching. So if we're taking, something like a tool and introducing it to a student, not only are we showing them how to do it, we're also asking them, why do you think this is helpful? Or what about trying this out for the week? And then report back to me and let me know what you thought went well and what didn't go well. Because if they can kind of work through those processes, then they eventually figure out like, oh, okay, now they just become better learners. They know more about the way that they approach tasks, and then they can use the appropriate tools that work best for them.
Thanks, Angela. And I'm going to go through, let's do like 2 more questions.
Yeah.
One is, my kids are doing a hybrid model, attending school on some days and doing remote learning on others. What is the best way for them to manage the alternating schedules and stay on top of their work?
Yeah. So I think some of the other tools that, we talked about can definitely be incorporated into this, but here's where I think maintaining some sort of routines and schedules is going to be really key for this. Just think about, for any of you parents who went to college, right? It's the same thing. You had different schedules on different days, and you had to be able to adjust your routines, but maintain some sort of consistency. So even if they're doing school at home, I would still have them do the same routine that they would be if they were going to school right now. So even, for my kids, we have the bedtime routine is here, brush your teeth, take a bath, in bed by this time. And then we have the morning routine where you need to be up by, 7 a.m. or depending on what time the bus comes. If you have kids in high school, the bus probably comes a little bit earlier. So I would say give them at least an hour to get ready in the morning, but give or take, right? Depends on how well they're able to manage the routines on their own. But they should be very specific steps. For younger kids, you can kind of print it out. I made schedules for my daughter, and I printed them, put them on her wall. She can't read yet, so I put pictures on there too, right? She's just learning how to read because she's in kindergarten. My son, I kind of had made some for him, and I gave them to him, and I said, look these over, tell me what you think. And then he has ADHD too. He looked at them, he crumpled it up and threw it in the garbage. And I'm like, that's fine. Okay. And so we're about a month into school, and he last night was thinking about, how he could manage his day better. And he's like, you know what? I think, and he verbally went through his schedule with me, and I was like, okay, that sounds good. So he went upstairs on his computer, he wrote it all out. Doesn't look, super pretty, but it works for him. And then he printed it and hung it on his wall all by himself. And it was something I had tried to get him to do before, but he didn't like the fact that it was my idea and that I just asked him to give me feedback. And so in that case, right, he had kind of had to come up with it on his own. And some kids just need to be able to do that on their own in their own time. So,
Well, and it's interesting that you're saying that, Angela, because as parents, we get very stressed keeping our kids on track, and we understand what's going to happen when they fall
yes.
behind. We know that we're going to have to nag at them. But unfortunately, sometimes they have to have that natural consequence of being stressed a little bit. And then we kind of problem solve, which is also an executive functioning skill.
Right.
Is problem solve some of those options that might help them to think through what are some things that I might do? Because they do really need to own it, like you said.
Yes.
Works for one student or one person may not work for the other. I think parents get anxious and they want to press their strategy onto their child, and it may not be the way the child wants to do it. But if they can tweak it or let the child take some ownership of it, it could benefit them.
Yeah, and one thing too, that's a good point, because we have different perspectives on what it means to be effective, what it means to be efficient, what it means to be successful. It's all based on your own self-knowledge, your own experiences in the past, right? It looks different for every person. And so one thing, as a parent, which I know I can definitely work on, but you can ask your student, well, what do you think it looks like? And get their input that way. And that's a way to kind of help them start thinking through the process too. Because oftentimes they might have an idea of what, their ideal day looks like. And it's very different from what your idea of the ideal day looks like. Now, there's probably going to be some differing opinions in there. Like my son's ideal day is watching YouTube and playing Xbox all day. So I do have to put in some parameters there. But those are things that we definitely try to weave in.
How would you, when we think about some of these strategies, and these are great tips, great tools, if people have additional questions, Angela, and they feel like they need some additional support, what do you recommend? Like, how could an executive coach work with them to improve maybe their workspace? What's the process look like?
Yeah, so going to our website is actually the best thing to do. So if you go to just beyondbooksmart.com, that's our division for students. We do have a separate division called WorkSmart Coaching for Adults, which we just launched brand new last week. So that's really exciting. But so beyondbooksmart.com, there's a ton of information on our website just about what executive function skills are, what coaching is about, what kind of skills kids need at different grade level. So we break it down by elementary, middle, high school, college. And if they wanted to learn more, they can schedule a consultation with a member of our client services team. And that's right on our homepage. It'll take them to a form. They can fill out their information. And then our client services team will reach out to see how we can help and whether coaching would be a good option for them. If they want to move forward with a coach, then they will go through the process with our client services team to kind of get the ball rolling on that. We have case studies, infographics, and I can link some infographics in the comments after, just about, but I mentioned those distraction fighting apps. I'll link those. We also have some that kind of highlight language and how to be a little bit more collaborative with your child to help them kind of come up with their own skills and strategies rather than you telling them what to do, which is, I know I'm guilty of as a parent, even though I'm also an executive function coach, I do it.
Think about with that kind of prompt dependency, right? So we don't want our kids to just be dependent on us telling them what to do. That kind of doesn't influence our executive functioning system positively. So we want to create those neural connections by having that child do the thinking. So
we hear a lot of parents when they contact us, it's I don't want to be the homework police anymore. I don't want to be in charge of my child's day anymore. Like I'm frustrated myself with having to remind them and be their Google Assistant or their calendar reminder. We hear that a lot. Like, I need help. I need them to be able to do this on their own. And so that's what our coaching is all about. It's all about helping people be able to self-manage and be more efficient for themselves, because these skills, like we've talked about this whole time, is yes, they're very weaved into our academics, but they also affect how we work as an adult. I know I've had a lot of adults and parents once they sign their kids up for coaching, they realize I need this too. Where's the coaching for me? So, and so we have BookSmart now, which
great to hear. And then the
is
other
for them.
mention too is if parents are wondering about executive functioning skill, I don't know if you do assessments in your practice. I know we do. We can assess individuals. There are some very specific tools that psychologists can utilize to help assess the level of executive functioning skill in various areas. And we use that through not only one-on-one assessments, but we can also use parent and teacher rating scales and self-reports to get observational data to assess where your executive functioning challenges specifically are. And then that would probably be something useful for you, Angela, to take that to the coach and say, these are the areas that I really struggle in.
Yeah. So when a client signs up for coaching, we will ask them, have you been assessed by a neuropsychologist? And if they have, then we will ask if they would like to share the report, because oftentimes, right, there's a specific recommendation section for executive functioning, and we can take that information and help craft our coaching plan. We'll survey them when they come on board, just to kind of ask them to rate their different executive function areas, so we can help them come up with goals. But having that data from a neuropsych report is extremely helpful.
Good to know. Great. Now, how can people reach you, Angela, if they have more questions? These were great ideas. I really appreciate you talking about them today.
Yeah, thank you for having me. So I can put my email address in the comments section, but it's just my first initial last name. So A Molloy, MOLLOY at beyondbooksmart.com. So you feel free to reach out to me if you have questions, but really the best place to go, straight to our website. More than likely, if you have a question, it can be answered on there.
And what's the there that they should look for?
Yep. So they just go to beyondbooksmart.com.
Great to have you. And we'll look forward to those resources. Angela, if anyone has questions, please reach out to us through our Facebook page, comment section, or directly through our websites or emails. And wonderful having you today.
Yeah, thank you. And can I add the one extra about the webinar next week?
Oh, absolutely.
Yes. So I mentioned my son's ideal day is going to be watching YouTube and playing Xbox all day. And so I know a lot of parents probably feel that same way, right? All your kids want to do is be on the screens, play these video games. Our CEO, Michael Delman, is actually partnering with a psychiatrist from, I believe he's from the Washington, D.C. area, who's an expert in video game addiction. And so they are doing a live free webinar on Tuesday, the 29th. It'll be about the same time, about lunchtime. So I can put a link in there if anybody wants to sign up. I'm sorry, say that again. 29th,
Angela?
The 29th, yes,
September.
Tuesday.
Okay.
Yeah, oh yes, September 29th, yes. Yes, that would be helpful to add, right? And I'll put the link in the chat for that too. It's free, again, free registration. And it'll be at 12 p.m. Central Time next week, I think 1 p.m. Eastern.
Yeah, we'll look forward to that. That's a very interesting topic as well.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you for that.
Yeah, no problem.
Well, wonderful having you today. And we look forward to the resources that you're providing.
Yeah, thank you so much, Lisa.
Have a wonderful time. And thank you guys for tuning in.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.